taking time out of your evening to learn more about our current proposal for student assignment for the 23-24 school year. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just as a reminder, today's session is specifically about the central area and northern area recommendations in this year's first draft of the enrollment plan. If you have questions about other areas, we certainly encourage you to stick around. We may have some time toward the end to talk through those, but the presentation will focus on the moves and recommendations specific to this area. As a reminder, we did share some of this information with the school board on September 20th. In fact, a much fuller and comprehensive presentation was given that covered the entire district. But the presentation that we're going to share with you today is sort of a truncated or abbreviated version of that presentation that focuses just on the central and northern areas. Before we get too much further in, I do want to thank you all for joining us and let you know that we are extremely grateful that you're here with us tonight. We do ask that if you have questions, you please ask them. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that we can present those. You can present those questions to us. And we want to show those to you right now. So if you'll look in your chat, we're going to post some of this information in there for you. There's two ways that we will be able to take information from you today. One is through our thought exchange. So if you haven't already had a chance to visit our thought exchange, we would encourage you to do that during tonight's presentation. At any point during the presentation, you are welcome to post your thoughts or questions there. And if you'll use the hashtag session1, that'll help us recognize that the thoughts you're putting in are from you, from the participants in tonight's session, so that we can make sure we address specifically those questions later on in our presentation today. However, if you feel a little bit more comfortable using our chat tool, you're welcome to do so. Just know that if you have a comment or question that's posted to the chat, it may or may not be completely assimilated into the full set of data that will be shared with the board later, as the thought exchange is our official capture tool for all of these public comments and questions. But please feel free to use either method to get questions to us today. Does anybody have any questions about how to access either of these platforms to be able to submit questions to us today? Okay, then let's move forward. As was mentioned in the video that was shown at the opening of our session, there are four major pillars that sort of underscore the process of student assignment here in Wake County. And while we say that none of these are more important than the other, we do agree that they all work together in concert to be able to guide the planning process. Student achievement is always at the forefront of our minds, and stability, proximity, and operational efficiency then are woven together to try to ensure that we have good use of our facilities, as well as much as possible, a stable assignment plan for families. During the board session on September 20th, we did share a few updates that sort of present a backdrop for this year's recommendations. And we want to take a little bit of time to walk through some of those updates with you before we get into the specific recommendations for the central and northern areas. First, we actually used a thought exchange earlier. And in that thought exchange that we hosted in June, we did ask families what the most important factors for a school to be a good fit for your family are. And what we found were that we had, well, just under 3,000 participants, which was a wonderful first run for us with our thought exchange. We captured just over 2,500 thoughts from those participants, and we were able to collect a total of 56,000 plus ratings. If you've not used our thought exchange before, the basic process is that you log in using the link that was provided in the chat, and then you start by maybe posting your comment or your thought or your response to the core question. Once you've entered one or two or as many thoughts as you have, then you can move into the rating phase. And during the rating phase, you'll get a shuffle of randomly assorted thoughts that have been posted by other participants. And you're asked to sort of assess your affirmation of those thoughts or comments. Do you agree with them? Do you feel like they're a good thought? And you can use a star rating of either 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. The system continues to capture all of those ratings, and then over time, we start to get an average rating for each of the thoughts. And so in this case, the thought exchange that we ran in June, we actually ended up with an average rating of about 22 stars or ratings per thought, which is a really wonderful participation rate. During that thought exchange, because we were asking families generally without a map specifically in front of them, thinking about a specific assignment recommendation, just what is it that helps you to decide if a school is a good fit for your family? From a star rating perspective, individual words like safety, caring, quality, staff, strong, those types of words had a really high rating. In and of themselves, though, they're just individual words. So, another feature of the thought exchange is that it allows us to group thoughts based on themes. And what we found was that quality of staff, safety, education quality, and good communication were very highly rated aspects of what makes a school a good fit for a family. You'll notice that all of these had a 4.1 to 4.2 average star rating, meaning they had a lot of energy and support for the idea that I think a school is a good fit for my students or for my family when I feel like there's strong quality educators and leadership there, when the academic quality is high, when my students feel safe at campus, and when I feel like I'm getting good communication from the school. Not far behind at an average rating of about 4 aspects like a sense of community, proximity to my home, stability of that assignment, those also were very highly rated. What you're seeing here are any of the themes that basically averaged a 3.5 or higher energy rating or star rating, such that diversity, calendar continuity, and calendar choice, special education services also round out sort of uh, basically like a top 10 of themes. You'll see over here a final column of miscellaneous that just captures any of the thoughts that didn't fit into those categories. So based on that information, we did do one step further. We noticed that high quality education and proximity were extremely important to families or had a high value in that original thought exchange. So we worked with our data research and accountability department and asked them to help us arrange some focus groups where we could dive in deeper on those two core areas. We did have a total of 23 participants in those focus groups. So we need to be cautious and not overgeneralize the information that came out of those focus groups, but it was very meaningful conversation around these two core areas. And what we did take away from that were these four key takeaways. First, that clear communication, consistent with what we saw in the original thought exchange, is really important, particularly with regard to how student assignment decisions are made, how year-round schools work, and other topics related to why assignment decisions are being made. Another key takeaway was that in this particular group, so again, we have to be cautious not to overgeneralize. There was a consensus that reassignment or capping schools were less favorable to perhaps changing a school to a year-round calendar to address capacity needs so that families could remain at a proximate school. It's an interesting sort of new trend that we're seeing here with this particular group. So we'll continue to explore that idea with future assessments and conversations with families. Another idea, obviously, is we kind of asked some questions around why is proximity important? And we really gathered from these groups that proximity is important because families feel that if the school is a little bit closer to home, they can participate more in the student's academic experience, which then they perceive will help to increase student achievement for their students. And again, coming back to that idea of strong, educated teachers, that really having that sense of a high quality staff at the school really is a significant factor in a family evaluating if the school is considered high quality. So this is one set of data, the information that we pulled from families there in June. And then what we're going to do moving forward is continue this public engagement process. And you're part of one of those steps, which is our information sessions. As you can see here highlighted, this is today's session. We do have 3 additional sessions that will focus on the other areas of the county. And you're welcome to join us for those, or if you'd like to encourage family, neighbor, friend to join us for one of those sessions, please do. Um, we will gather all of the information from these sessions as well as any information collected in our new thought exchange that's currently open and will stay open through October 7th. And we'll use that information as we're crafting any edits or revisions to the current draft so that we can prepare draft 2 for the board. Additional information we like to keep in mind in it. So first we start off with public information, public engagement, information from parents and families. We need to be mindful of some existing crowded schools. We have several schools that currently are capped, meaning if families move into the base attendance area for these schools now, there is a chance that there might not be sufficient space for their student and they might be assigned to what we call an overflow school. They'll get transportation to that school, but obviously it's not the school that's assigned for their address, and that can sometimes not feel very welcoming. But it is one way that we address some of our crowding at our schools, and you saw a little bit of that in the introductory video. And one final piece of information we want to, clearly make sure we're paying attention to is that we do have a capital improvement plan with several schools scheduled to open in the coming years. You can see here in 2024-25, there is an elementary school scheduled to open in the sort of Apex Cary area called Woods Creek Elementary. Actually, I think that's more Apex Holly Springs. And then we have several schools that are currently projected to open in 25-26. So any recommendations that we make for the 23-24 school year, we want to be mindful won't necessarily be impacted by the opening of these schools as well. So we have to be cautious that we're not intentionally assigning students that might then also be impacted by the opening of a new school. And we do have one high school that's not yet been named that'll be in the Morrisville area that is also scheduled to open in 27-28. And we want to be thoughtful of that as we're making any recommendations in that area. Several of these schools are located in the Holly Springs, Fuquay, Apex areas, basically our high growth areas. Parkside Middle School, with a component of the Wake Early College Information and Biotechnology campus, will be in that sort of northwestern section of the Cary area, very near the existing Parkside Elementary School, if you're familiar with that region. So taking into consideration the public feedback, the policy guidance from Board Policy 4150, what we know about our current crowded schools and CAP schools, and of course, what we know about our future construction plans, we have set forth some base assignment change recommendations to address crowding, to help with underutilized schools, and wherever possible to help improve transportation efficiency. Those are the three sort of core goals for this year's assignment recommendations. This is a general overview of base assignment recommendations that are being made at the elementary school level across the entire county. Today, we'll focus on those in this sort of central area that also are impacting the northern area a little bit as well. We also have an overview slide that reviews what's going on with the middle school recommendations. Again, we'll focus on the central area for today's presentations, but you can see that there are some recommendations in other parts of the county as well. And finally, an overview of high school recommendations. So today we'll talk some about those that are here in the central area, and then other presentations will cover the ones that are over here in the west. Before we get too deep into the specific recommendations for the central and northern areas, we want to remind everyone that we do come up with stability rules for each enrollment plan. And recognizing that this year's enrollment plan specifically addresses no new schools. It's really focusing on addressing overcrowded schools, underutilized schools, and improving transportation efficiencies. The recommendation is to have some very generous stability rules. We do need to be mindful that this recommendation is specific to the 23-24 enrollment plan. We can't guarantee that this flexibility will be able to be offered in future assignment plans. But for this plan, this is the recommendation that was currently being proposed. And that's that all existing students that are currently in the school would be allowed to remain at the school even if reassigned. The only sort of middle ground piece there is that district transportation would no longer be provided. We recognize that that can be a little bit cumbersome for some families, but we feel like that kind of hits the middle ground, that you can stay at the school if you'd like to, if you have a way to get to and from school. In addition, to be a little bit more generous, we're also recommending that rising kindergarten or sixth or ninth grade siblings, depending on the grade level of the student, also be allowed to join their older student at the school going into the 23-24 school year, and then be able to remain as well. So really just listening to that feedback from families about the importance of stability, recognizing that we're not necessarily opening new schools that need to be filled, kind of addressing those two pieces all at one time. So going specifically into the central area and northern area, before I go into these recommendations, I just want to remind everybody again, if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat, and you can ask those while I'm talking, and then we'll address them toward the end. Also, you can use the thought exchange using that hashtag session1, and you can look in the chat for those links if you need those reminders. So looking at the central area, zip through there a little bit quickly. Looking in the central area, one recommendation that we have is to look at a section of the existing Farmington Woods Elementary School base and have it assigned into Washington Elementary School's base. So what you're seeing on this slide is that the sort of teal green color represents the existing Farmington Woods Elementary base attendance area. This triangle represents the physical location of Farmington Woods Elementary. And then the sort of pinkish purple area represents the Washington Elementary School base, and the school is nestled right there inside of that. I'm going to advance the slide so we can zoom in a little bit to the specific recommendation. As you can see, there's a relatively major thoroughfare that separates these two areas. It's McDowell Road, and we're recommending taking the portion that's just east of McDowell Road and assigning it into Washington Elementary. This is not a large number of students, but it will help with transportation efficiency and allow for these students to go to a school that's a little bit closer to their home. With this recommendation, I'm going to kind of orient you to this slide. You'll see one of these slides with every recommendation that we talk through. The top set of tables represents if we do nothing from a crowding and capacity perspective. And then the bottom set of tables represents the impact if the recommendation is approved. As you can see, in this case, it's not a large number of students involved, so it does take advantage of a little bit of the available capacity at Washington Elementary and does still leave sufficient room at Farmington Woods to take on additional magnet applications. Both of these schools are magnet schools. Another recommendation in the central area is to assign a particular area that's currently assigned to Laurel Park Elementary. So the light green color or lime green color represents Laurel Park Elementary's base attendance area. The school is physically located over here to the west. And then there's a portion of the attendance area that's just adjacent to the existing Fuller Elementary base. I'm going to advance the slide so we can zoom into that area. The recommendation is that this area that's currently assigned to Laurel Park Elementary be assigned to Fuller Elementary. Fuller is one of our newly renovated campuses that had an additional capacity added into the building site with the renovation. And so this recommendation takes advantage of that new capacity that's available and also some changing dynamics with the housing in this area so that it's a good fit for Fuller Elementary, but it doesn't fill it up too full. As you can see, it still does leave some space at Fuller Elementary for additional magnet students to be able to be seated at the school. Additionally, the relief at Laurel Park provides some space to address some of the crowding that we're seeing in the west and allows it to continue to take on year-round application students as well. Another move in the central area that we're recommending is a portion of the Olds Elementary base. So this sort of light blue color here represents the existing Olds Elementary base. The purple represents the Hunter Elementary base. And so we're recommending this portion that's adjacent to the existing Hunter Elementary base be able to be assigned to Hunter. Olds is experiencing some overcrowding. Hunter has some available space to handle these students. And this area we're still doing some final assessments with sidewalks and so forth, but we're fairly certain that this will be part of a walk zone for Hunter. So not only does it allow the students to go to a school that's a little bit more proximate to home, it might even allow them to be able to walk to school. As you can see by the capacity changes, it does provide some relief to Olds Elementary, one of our smallest schools in the district, as you can tell by its capacity of 220. And it does take some of that available space that's at Hunter Elementary School as well. So these three recommendations that we've walked through already are basically being recommended based on facility utilization in terms of relieving some crowding at some schools, as well as some operational efficiency on the side of transportation. This set of moves is a little bit more complex in that it involves about 4 schools, so we thought it was easier to show it as a single slide. This sort of darker purple area towards the top right of the screen represents Oak Grove Elementary's base. It's a portion of Oak Grove Elementary base. The Oak Grove Elementary School is a little bit farther west, and so this is a non-contiguous portion of its base attendance area. The lime green, sort of yellow colored section represents a portion of the Wiley Elementary base. Wiley Elementary is physically located just west of what you can see here on this screen. And this portion is just one of the areas that's a little bit farther east of the school site that's also assigned to Wiley Elementary. The area highlighted in this circle is currently assigned to Northridge Elementary, which is farther north in the district, in the northern area of the district. And the light pink area represents the existing attendance area for Bug Elementary. And this little triangle right here represents the physical site of Bug Elementary. What you see in the circle that's on the top half of the screen are 2 areas that are currently assigned to Oak Grove that we're recommending be assigned to Wiley Elementary. Join this portion of the Wiley Elementary base. They are both just west of Donald Ross Drive to orient you in terms of where they're located, and they're nestled around the Raleigh Country Club. In addition, this area that's currently assigned to Northridge Elementary, that is, again, in a walking distance from Bug Elementary, we're recommending being assigned to Bug Elementary. There's some available capacity at the school site at this time due to some changes in the neighborhood and the demographics of the area. So we feel that this would help to allow the school to have some more students enrolled, but still leave space for those magnet students that can apply to the program at Bug Elementary. In addition, there's this portion that's on the northwest edge of the existing North Ridge Elementary School base attendance area that by roadway network actually is continuous with a part of the roadway network that's served by Wiley Elementary. So we are recommending that this portion, this neighborhood, instead of being assigned to Bug from North Ridge, be assigned to Wiley from North Ridge. As you can see by the overall impact across all four schools, it does provide some relief to the crowding at Northridge Elementary. It takes advantage of the available capacity at Bug Elementary, as well as some of the available capacity at Wiley Elementary. And with Oak Grove being a multi-track year-round school, this does provide some space at the school to take on additional year-round application students and or to provide some support to some of the crowding in that region of the district. So these recommendations are being based on operational efficiency as well as transportation and proximity. What you're seeing here looks very similar to the slide that I just showed you because this is what I call a complementary move. Since we're moving the elementary assignment for these areas or making a recommendation for that, we're also recommending that the middle school assignments be aligned as well. So the area that's currently assigned to Northridge Elementary is also currently assigned to West Millbrook Middle. So the recommendation would be to assign it from West Millbrook Middle to Ligon Middle. And the portion that's currently assigned to Oak Grove is currently assigned to Dillard Drive Middle, where Wiley tends to go on to Oberlin. So the recommendation is to assign those students from Dillard Middle to Oberlin Middle. And again, that's to align sort of the feeder pattern essentially for the schools. So this allows, again, for operational efficiency, for feeder pattern alignment, and of course, some transportation efficiency. And as you can see here, the impact on the schools is pretty balanced. It leaves West Millbrook with some space because it's also one of our newly renovated campuses that has an expanded capacity. So we'll be able to fill that with some students that are more local to the school. And it is one of our magnet schools as well. So we can take on additional magnet applications with that new capacity that's available. And that pretty much covers the assignments that are being recommended for the central area. There are some assignment recommendations related to Broughton High School, but they're being recommended to go into Southeast Raleigh High School. So they'll be presented in tomorrow night's session, which will discuss the Southeast Raleigh area as well as Eastern and Northeastern areas. So if you are interested in that, you're welcome to come visit us again tomorrow to hear that portion of the presentation, or we can maybe even ask some, answer some questions later today. Before we continue on to our questions, I do have a couple of more information items. One is calendar application changes. What you're going to see here in the next several slides are recommendations related to what families see as a calendar application with transportation option. So if you're familiar with our year-round application process or our traditional calendar application process, currently, if you're based at this particular elementary school, when you look in the magnet and year-round application period, you might see a year-round application school that's available to you with transportation. If you're based at a year-round elementary school during the transfer period, you might want to put in a request for a traditional calendar school, and you're trying to maybe see if that comes with transportation. Due to some of our transportation concerns, as well as what we're seeing in terms of patterns of choice, we're actually recommending changing some of those up a little bit. So for example, if you look at the Ballantine recommendation, which I know isn't this particular region, but just for an example, currently those students that are base assigned to this school, Ballantine, which is a multi-track year round, they will see Fuquay Varina Elementary and Lincoln Heights Elementary as a choice. And as you can imagine, that creates additional bus routes in those areas to have to go to those two separate schools. So our recommendation is to narrow that down to a single choice so that transportation can create one series of routes to take students to that particular traditional calendar school. You see the same recommendations here for this sort of Bauckham Laurel Park area. In other areas, you're seeing an NA. And what that means is that we're not necessarily saying families can no longer ask for these schools. We're simply saying that bus transportation from the district will no longer be provided if they were to request that school and get a seat there. So the change for those particular recommendations here is simply to remove the district transportation that is currently provided. This will help with transportation efficiency, and it'll address some of our crowding concerns as well. You can look at all the full list of these on our website. I'll kind of leave each screen up for a couple of moments. Most of the schools in the central area aren't significantly impacted by these changes, but there are a handful of recommendations that may impact you. If you see Hunter Elementary as your base school, Wilburn Elementary is currently a year-round application school that comes with district transportation. The recommendation would be simply to say that if a family asks for that choice, the district wouldn't provide transportation to the choice, but the family could still certainly submit that request. Similar to the stability rules that we recommended for the base assignment changes, they apply to these as well. So if you do have a seat at one of these schools, you'd be welcome to stay at the school without transportation if you'd like, or you could make the request to come back to base or to perhaps ask for something different during our magnet year-round or traditional, or excuse me, transfer application windows. And again, if you have questions, please put those in our chat or post those to the thought exchange using the hashtag session1. We're almost to questions. This is a third page of the elementary schools, and that kind of gets us all the way down to the W's. Some of these types of recommendations have been being made over the last several years, and so this is just continuing that effort to consolidate some of the transportation routes related to calendar application. We have a few recommendations at the middle and high school level as well. Again, same situation. It's not that we're saying that these families can't request these choices. They certainly can during the transfer window. It's simply that the transportation from the district will no longer be provided. We've talked about the stability rules at the open, but I always think it's good to reiterate them again with no new schools opening and with some of these recommendations impacting families that would like to stay at their currently assigned school. We are recommending generous stability rules so that if a family is impacted by this and they have the ability to provide their own transportation or carpool with friends, they're welcome to stay at their current school. We will provide specific directions and instructions to families that are actually impacted when we release draft 2, just so that they can start to think about how they would put in those requests. But the recommendation is that we would use these generous stability rules in addition to adding that piece that I mentioned earlier about rising kindergarten, 6th or 9th grade siblings. So that way the family could stay together at the school if that's what they'd prefer. And then one last information item and we'll get to questions. So just kind of where do we go from here? So obviously right now we're going through our public information and public engagement activities that are happening here in the September to October timeframe. After October 7th, when we close down the thought exchange, we'll evaluate all of that information, and then we will go ahead and put some refinements together and bring a draft 2 to the board. So on October 18th, staff will present a revised version, we call it draft 2, of the current proposal. And then at that point, the board will be able to, they'll have had an opportunity to look at it over the last month, just like you have, provide some specific feedback to staff about any additional changes they'd like to see, as well as opening yet another thought exchange. So we have one more opportunity for families to give feedback and comments related to the plan. And the goal would be that by November 15th, the board feels comfortable voting on and approving the final version of the plan. November 10th, if you want to bookmark that, November 10th will be the public hearing for the Board of Education specific to that final, preparing that final draft. It is held on a Thursday, and that's just to make sure that it's clear that this is a very specific public hearing specific to the student assignment plan, as opposed to the general public comment that would be part of a regular meeting. So on November 10th, we would invite families to sign up for that, and instructions will come through our communications office and our parent emails on how to participate in that process. And then again, our anticipation is that the board will feel comfortable voting around on the November 15th board meeting. As a reminder, we talked about this at the opening of the session. Today is September 28th, so you're our kickoff, our first information session. So going into tomorrow, we'll have another session. And then going into next week, we'll have 2 additional sessions that focus on the 2 other areas of the district. There were 4 basic regions that were covered by the proposals, and so we broke this up into those 4 regions to make sure we could answer specific questions to the area. And so with that, I will open it to questions. In fact, I thought I had an extra slide in here, so if you'll close your eyes for just a minute, I'll zip back to that thought exchange so that if you have any questions that you'd like to pose for us, I do apologize. I thought I had an extra slide at the end so we wouldn't have to go backwards. But at this point in time, if you do have any questions for us, please feel free to post those to the chat or to put them into our thought exchange using hashtag session 1, and we will start answering questions. And I'll kind of defer to our host to let me know if we have received any questions and which questions we might be able to help respond to.
No questions yet.
While we're waiting to see if you have any specific questions, we have noticed through the existing participants in the thought exchange leading up to tonight, lots of questions about the stability rules. So hopefully we've addressed that, but we'll, again, just one more time, with no new schools opening, we are recommending very generous stability rules so that if families do want to stay at their current school and have the ability to figure out the transportation piece, we're happy to approve those. In fact, we're even working on a process to where we can get those approved before everybody breaks for winter break in December, so that we can have that taken care of and buttoned up going into January. In addition, there have been some questions more in the Western area, but in some other areas, well, why reassign us? Why not reassign someone else? And we just like to remind everybody that the reassignment recommendations are made very thoughtfully, thinking about the potential opening of new schools in a particular area. We certainly want to be mindful that we're not reassigning students this year that might also be impacted by the opening of a new school in another 2 or 3 years. And we also are thinking about what we know about growth patterns in the area. So sometimes the reason why we're recommending this particular area to be reassigned is because we know we can make this reassignment and let it stick for a good long while. We're really trying to create stable changes. So while change in and of itself isn't stable, we understand that if we make a recommendation, we want it to be able to stick for a foreseeable future versus making a reassignment that might then be impacted by the opening of a new school in a couple of years. And those are two major questions that we saw a lot of thoughts and ideas and concerns about in the existing thought exchange.
Again, let us know in the chat if you have any questions, or use the thought exchange and use hashtag session1.
And since we're sort of at the end of this session, we have some time left over. If you had questions about a different area, well, I don't necessarily have the slides to show you the maps. I certainly could take any questions on other areas of the county if you had those as well.
Ms. Pulliam, we have one question. Can the Dillard Drive Elementary information be shared?
So let's see, maybe I can stop sharing for a moment and see if I can pull up that map. So we're talking about the recommendation from Dillard Drive to Adams Elementary, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. Make sure I get the right one. So the recommendation there, similar, a little bit different to what we saw here in the central presentation, is that there are some significant crowding concerns at Dillard Drive Elementary, and it is one of our language dual, I think one of 2 language dual immersion programs that we have in our magnet program. And so we are looking for ways to provide some relief to the crowding that's at Dillard currently and what we're seeing with growth patterns and development patterns in the area, as well as take advantage of some available capacity in a nearby school, as well as take advantage of maybe some transportation efficiencies. So those 3 guiding principles are really what led to the recommendation related to Dillard Drive. So let me make sure and confirm this is the recommendation that the person was asking about. So if you'll look at the blue area represents the existing Dillard Drive Elementary base, and this sort of tannish brown color represents the existing Adams Elementary base. And so the recommendation, as I mentioned, based on the crowding concerns at Dillard Drive Elementary, transportation efficiency, that's kind of always in the back of our mind going into this particular enrollment plan, and the physical proximity to Adams Elementary, which is here, the recommendation is to take this attendance area. If you're familiar with the region, this lower portion that's closer to US 1 and 64 is that South Hills Mall kind of shopping area. And then the northern sort of northwestern edge of that same attendance area is the old mall that's now the Epic Games property. And so it's the attendance areas that are in between those 2 spaces. We recognize that this represents quite a few families that are currently attending Dillard Drive. Again, part of the reason why we recommended the stability rules. If the families would like to remain at Dillard Drive and have a way to get there either by carpool or what have you, then we would be happy to approve those transfers. Otherwise, the Adams Elementary is physically located right here, very adjacent to the property. We would recommend that assignment be made. And if you look at um, the utilization rates you can see here, it will immediately provide some relief to Dillard Drive Elementary. Now, this is extreme because it does presume that everybody goes, which we know in this case, a lot of families will request the stability transfer. And any space that is made available at Dillard Drive would, over time, would be able to be filled with those magnet applications. And then it does take advantage of the available capacity at Adams Elementary. Were there more specific questions related to that recommendation?
None for Dillard. There is one more question asking if Sanford, Creek, and Roseville are affected. Are they remaining the same?
Sanford, Creek, and Roseville Elementary, from a base assignment perspective and currently from a calendar perspective, we are recommending no changes to either of those schools. There may be some changes to the calendar application area for those two schools, but that would be all. No base changes, and right now no calendar changes are being recommended for any schools in the assignment plan at this point in time.
Send us any other questions you may have.
Miss Pulliam, this is Roxy Cash.
Yes, ma'am.
I do see a question that pops up, but I don't know if it's popping up in the right spot. And it's about how do these changes impact overflow schools? I don't know if it's showing up somewhere that, and it
When I share my
hopefully,
screen, I can't see them, so I do rely on my assistant. So thank you. So the changes would impact overflow schools in the sense that the ones we're seeing here in this particular recommendation for the central area aren't specifically addressing, I don't think, some of our CAP schools, but other assignment changes that are impacting CAP schools. The goal would be to provide enough relief to the CAP schools that the overflow schools would no longer be necessary for those handful of changes. And then over time, looking for more long-term solutions. I'm sure Ms. Cash can echo this, that the goal of the board has been to try where possible to not use caps when we don't have to, because we realize the instability that provides for families. And it is a temporary solution to a more complex problem. So generally what would happen is that if the school is in the as far as the basic concept of captain overflow schools, that is generally a separate consideration. And so that presentation usually comes to the board a little bit later, early in the spring, late winter, around February time, when we know a little bit more about what's happening with enrollment patterns. And so very specific recommendations related to whether or not we can remove a cap from a school based on an approved assignment change, or if we need to add a cap to a school because we couldn't get an assignment change approved, things like that. Those will usually show up a little bit later in the year in February.
Ms. Williams, somebody is asking who can they speak with about a specific student issue and a proposed move.
You can certainly, so if we're talking about specific student issues, I would encourage you to you can email me directly and I can get one of my staff members to help you with that. And we can put that in the chat if we need to, Corrali. It's spulliam@wcpss.net. So if you have a specific family question, we certainly want to take that offline. And we want to get your contact information and follow up with you in the morning. If it's just generally, how do I go about asking for a transfer, that sort of thing, we can also answer those questions as well. A lot of that information, we always will say it's found on our website, but we know that that's not the most friendly response. So please, I think Corrali's going to put my email address in the chat box so that if you do have specific questions about your individual family, I can handle those offline for you.
Let us know if you have any more questions.
One more thing, as different questions come up, if you think of questions after today, the thought exchange, as I said, will be open through October 7th. Please continue to use that. If you email me directly, that's fine. Just know that doesn't get included in the thought exchange. So if you do have a very specific question that you want, a personal answer for about your family, by all means, let me know. But if it's more of, I want to make sure the board hears this question, I want to make sure the board understands my perspective, please make sure that gets into the thought exchange. 2 reasons for that. 1, it stays in your own words exactly as you typed it. So that really makes sure we're capturing your thought as you intend for it to be written. 2nd, it gets into that role for the rating. So if other families have that same concern or that same question, we can get some star ratings behind that and show that there's energy behind that thought or that idea. And then 3rd, of course, it's the official capture message. So all of that will be analyzed and brought together for the board at their October 18th meeting so that they can see how everyone was responding to the first draft.
No questions yet.
Okay. All right. We thank everybody for your time again. I think Crowley has shared my email address. If you do have a personal question, please feel free to use that. And again, if you think of something later, we all know that you're sitting at the table and go, oh, wait, I thought I should ask this question. By all means, either send it to me or put it on the thought exchange so that we can make sure it gets included with all of the feedback that's being collected for the first draft. And one more time, if you have friends or family or neighbors that you think would be benefited by participating in one of these sessions, please encourage them to come to either our session tomorrow night or one of our sessions next week. Do know that, again, similar to this one, we'll focus on the one area, but any time that we have toward the end of the session, we can dedicate to any additional questions families might have that are specific to their area. Coralie, I'll let you wrap us up with all the official buttons and bows.
All right, thank you all again for attending. I am going to stop the recording in a second, and I will post this recording onto our website and on our YouTube page for those who want to rewatch or for those who missed this session. But thank you very much for attending, and this is it.